Hello everyone, we are now in week 6, and so week 6 is going to include 3 chapters. They're not very long, but there is a lot of information, so I'm going to go ahead and get going. So week 6 is going to be found in Module 6, as you've already found, chapters 12, 13, and 14. So starting out with chapter 12, this is all about companion animal behavior and social structure. So first of all, kind of just going over a little bit of what behavior is. So this is how an animal reacts to an internal or external stimulus. So reading through the book, it talks about natural selection and how this has basically contributed to behavior because of the way we selected animals over the years. Obviously, we select for behaviors that we like better, and so that's artificial selection, but even natural selection is kind of the same thing. Different groups of animals throughout time selecting for these different responses. This can be something that's inherited, things like that. In your book, you can actually see, a little bit about the behavior problems. We know that these problems are usually going to be the biggest reasons why animals are going to be surrendered to animal shelters, which obviously is very sad. And so detecting these early on and trying to intervene at some point is really important. And so, these factors, the reason these happen, can be due to many different reasons. A lot of times too, it's just a mismatch with the owner and what they expect out of the pet, so not matching up. And this is why it's really important to consider what you're expecting when you're selecting a pet. As far as what kind of breed, how much energy they have, how much attention you can give that kind of pet. And so the book actually points out a border collie with a lot of energy, or something like a cat that kills birds, and this is normal for the cat, but might be unacceptable for the owner. They might not have good socialization of the pet when they're young, so that might be something for the problems. Other problems could be inadequate training, or unintentional owner reinforcement of bad behavior, accidentally having, and so all these different things can contribute to bad behavior. And if you see in the book, dogs can be aggression, destructive behavior, jumping on people, cats aggression as well, sexual behavior problems, unfriendliness, urine marking, things like that. And so we talk about all these different behaviors and how they're their structure. And so we're going to start off first by talking about socialization. So we know that a lot of young mammals can be tamed and socialized, and they can, become, socially attached to humans and vice versa. And this should happen very early in life. And so the book really outlines this primary socialization period. So this is really when we see about 3 weeks to up to 16 weeks of age. It's really important to establish these different things. And so the book does a good job of really outlining, the first 2 weeks of life. There's not much activity going on, but in week 3 is when you really start seeing that developmental phase where they're reacting to other species, maybe their siblings or their owners, and kind of going through, what the best thing to do. So then moving into 8 to 9 weeks, they're developing the stable learning. They're not really socializing up, for a while, and then they're going to start being social with humans as they progress through this PSP phase. And so it's super important that all these different things are getting established early on so they can learn to be comfortable with humans or comfortable to other species they might actually be around. Like if it's a dog, they're comfortable with a cat or vice versa. And so very, very important. And so make sure you're reading through this because it does give you a lot of information. And one thing too, the rule of 7 is something for a dog, but basically saying that by 7 weeks old, they should have been on 7 different types of surfaces. So that's everything from grass to carpet, dirt, gravel, so all kinds of different. They should played with 7 different types of objects, been in 7 different locations, met and played with 7 new people, been exposed to 7 challenges, so climbing on things, running, playing, things like that, eaten from 7 different containers, so they get used to that, and eaten in 7 different locations. And so this rule of thumb for dog breeders is kind of a good thing, that basically it helps establish all these different socialization techniques really early on, which is a really key period, right? And so also, the socialization is going to help you understand what mammal they're going to respond to, right? For example, right, so if an animal is raised, a wolf cub is raised by humans, they actually recognize humans as their own species, things like that. So we know too that the maternal influence is a big thing. They teach us social behavior, and so sometimes if they're not around their mother for a very long time, they might be missing out some on that socialization. Also observing, that's really important in kittens, so they, are really interested in observing and will watch other cats as far as learning, food preferences or elimination behavior, where to go to the bathroom. And then, lastly, talking a little bit about how, that they're very playful, and kind of, introducing into type of playfulness is really important for socialization. And they're also, to wrap this section up, is the puppy selection test. There's different types. So, social attraction. Will they come when called? Will they follow a person? How will they react when they're on their back? How do they react when you touch them in certain places? How do they react when held off the ground? And so some of these things, the research is still kind of being established, but is something you can kind of test whenever you're thinking about that early developmental stage of puppies. So this is just, showing a kitten poised for pouncing. So probably learning from watching another cat that was doing this. They've learned, trying to chase a spot on the floor. Another thing, playing with them, batting at a toy. All these things are early developmental steps that you can take with cats. So social structure in the wild, thinking about that and kind of comparing it to our domesticated animals. So for dogs, comparing, they go back, they're descended from wolves. So that social structure is a pack for wolves. They usually have small groups of related individuals of different ages. You have a social ranking that's established there. The alpha animals are going to be the leaders, usually a male and a female in each pack. And so kind of considering this and comparing it gives us a little insight to the behavior of dogs. And so, those domesticated dogs that we have unique behavioral characteristics. And, when you have multiple dogs, you usually have them kind of get into this sort of social structure, right? So you always have one that's kind of the leader, kind of the alpha. Now cats are going to be descended from the African wildcat. They've been bred to live with humans for so long and other companion animals. And so they're very independent and kind of do their own thing, but they also will develop really strong bonds with their owners, and are a lot more flexible and adaptable than dogs can be. Okay, so communicative behavior, and so we're going to get into this even more, kind of the different types of communication, but basically talking about how researchers is actually believing, that dogs and cats are going to have very similar types of emotion to humans, and they're going to react different ways to different emotions, and then they're also going to respond, through different signals, and just showing this is an offensive posture. So this is one way of communicating, which is going to be visual communication, which is postural. So how are they showing their body? So dogs and cats are going to employ body postures with various expressive behaviors that an owner can actually interpret, right? And so there's all these different, how they hold their head, how they hold their tail. So, cats typically greet people or other cats with their tail held vertically and their back legs kind of extended. These signals are going to, say if they want to play or something like that. Also, how they feel about what they're meeting. If their back is arched or the hair is raised, it's going to be kind of aggressive. If they think there's, a harmful something in the area, so their stance is going to change. And so this is just showing you a dominant stance of a dog. So the tail is high, ears are forward, they're staring the opponent. This is a submissive posture in a cat. The tail is stuffed in between the legs and they're avoiding eye contact. Here's a submissive posture in a dog, laying down, rolling partially on the back. And so submissive always isn't like going to be a bad thing, but they also, submissive like that, dogs will do this for someone they trust, right? So the same kind of thing, though. They are submitting to their owner, as opposed to, something where they're cowering in fear, or doing this where they're lowering their head and tail, their hair is being raised, they're snarling or maybe growling. And so this is going to tell a person a lot about how the dog is actually feeling, and then also obviously other animals when they view this, right? And then we have our, vocal communication. Vocal obviously too is going to help with understanding what they're thinking, right? So you have your 5 basic sound groups. So you have infantile sounds, so that's like crying, mews, whimpering or whining. Warning sounds, which would be hissing, barking or growling. Eliciting sounds, which is like barks, meows or howling. Withdrawal sounds, yelping, or like screaming kind of. And then pleasure sounds, which are moans, grunts, or purring. And so all these things are going to tell you exactly kind of, how they're feeling. So barking can be, very complex and have a variety of meanings. And the different pitches are for different situations, maybe for greeting or to sound an alarm. And so all dogs are going to be a little differently. And, as people, it's important to us to understand, like, oh, that's like an excited bark or something like that. Just like in a cat, this is a happy, kind of a mewing or a little meow that they're kind of like, talking to you, as opposed to like being upset about something, right? So, and this is going to be the olfactory communication. Okay, so a lot of times dogs have the keenest sense of smell of any domestic species, and so they're detecting different odors, and so a lot of times this is how they're going to, they meet each other and they use those scent clues to understand information. And so they're going to smell their dogs, but they smell people, right? To gather information about what's going on with whoever they're meeting. Dogs also are going to use urine as territory marking and to also identify individuals. Dogs will, urine over mark, so they urinate over the scent of urine deposited by another dog. So that's a pretty common thing. Cats also use their scent to mark their territories. Different postures are used for elimination versus actually the spraying when they're marking. And so it really just depends on which one they're doing. Unlike dogs, though, cats don't spray over the urine markings of other cats. They kind of have a different behavior there. And so they're different. And so here's just a picture here. So this is like a cat. This is kind of the same kind of thing, how they're communicating. This cat is depositing the scent on their owners by rubbing the side of their heads. So getting into other behavior indicators, just kind of go through these fairly quickly. Ingested behavior. So however they eat and drink is going to be really important to animal survival, and also one of those things that as the owners to really pay close attention to. There's been a lot of studies on this. So Pavlov actually did a study where he discovered important behavioral fundamental behavior things in dogs. He showed that the flow of saliva in the dog is a conditioned reflex, not an automatic reaction to the odor of the food. And so Pavlov would ring a bell each time he brought the food to the test dog. Eventually the dog began to actually salivate whenever he rang the bell. So they associated the ringing of the bell with the food, just as he associated the odor previously with the food. So just kind of some interesting research has been done on that, and done as far as behavior goes. When it comes to eating, it's hard to really understand when an animal wants to make a decision to eat, but anytime they change whatever their eating habits are, it's something important to pay attention to as an owner. As far as elimination behavior, kind of trying to, house train and things like that obviously is really important with both. But also, trying to pay attention to what their habits are there, or like, looking at their elimination. So their poop or their pee, and if it's changing colors or smell or something kind of seems off with it, making sure to, identify any potential issues there. When it comes to orientation behavior, this is referring to basically like the homing instincts. So it has, dogs and cats have actually demonstrated this by traveling, hundreds of miles to maybe go back to their territory that they're familiar with. They use this by smell and observing landmarks. And so this is something that a natural behavior. Agnostic, so this is the fighting or aggressive behavior. Much of this is going to be genetic. If you think about these animals in the wild, this is crucial for their survival of the species, right? And so, except for predators, we don't always see the interspecies fighting among companion animals. And so aggression is going to be one of those that a lot of times they might be aggressive defending their home or their owners. And if you look, if you look in your book, there's different types of aggression that's identified. So dominance, fear, protective, food-related, which is very common among pets. So lots of different types of aggression. Can be sexually related, and so that kind of brings us to the last one on this page. Courtship and mating, and when among companion animals, controlled largely by hormones. And so different things come into play when we talk about the different hormones whenever it's contributing, and we talked some about reproductive behavior in previous chapters, so I won't get into that too much. But now we're going to talk a little bit about behavioral problems. So first of all, understanding the different principles behind modifying behavior. So there's all of these different training techniques that you can use. Habituation. So exposing a stimulus to, an animal that doesn't result in pain. And so they learn to ignore it. Sensitization. This is coming to, they just get used to something. Classic conditioning. So all these different types of behavioral modification. There's a list in here that talks about, seeing changes in behavior as responding to a certain stimuli and why these things happening and different ways to do it, kind of leading us into different problems, right? So different behavior problems. So, addressing these is pretty important. And so the book kind of outlines it. It really is like a scientific theory, like you're doing an experiment, right? So identifying the problem, figuring out the history. So, when did this problem start? What was changing or what was different when the problem started? Let's evaluate it. So, what's happening? Like, is there any underlying condition or disease or something that's contributing to this problem? And then, bringing in treatment alternatives and strategies to hopefully fix whatever is going on. And then from there, educating the owner. So a lot of owners might not be aware of, what caused this, and so making sure they know how to best prevent this in the future, but also fix it right now, and vice versa. Some of the common behavioral problems we mentioned at the beginning of this chapter, so I won't get too into it. Just talking about separation anxiety or aggression, or urinating, marking like cats or something like that. So those common problems are all listed out in this chapter, and we kind of touched on them throughout it. Talking a little bit about dogs and cats and kind of some behavior, and we'll talk more about training and things like that in the future chapters. But we know that cats have innate instincts. They're nocturnal. They're by nature predatory and territorial. They can be pretty solitary and on their own. Some of these have been modified by domestication, but those instincts are really never lost. And so that's why the cats can actually go back to being, feral type animals pretty easily. Cats are going to be able to stare for long periods of time, which is something, when we think about in their natural habitat, that they're able to do to really evaluate their prey. And unlike dogs, cats are really independent. They don't really care if they're going to please their owners or not. So they don't really learn tricks like dogs. They don't really feel the need to impress their owners, right? And then, lastly, kind of rounding up, just talking a little bit about dog temperaments and trainability. That there's a lot of breeds out there, and we'll talk, in the next two chapters kind of about training and different techniques and different breeds. And, certain breeds have been bred to be personal guard dogs, or for people or for livestock. They might be used for different purposes, right? That is established over time, and so certain breeds are going to be more adaptable and amenable to different kinds of training depending on what they've been bred for a very long period of time. Okay, so chapter 13, this is all about care management of training of dogs and cats. Obviously, when we talk about this, especially training, there's probably so much extensive information that we can get way beyond what the book is presenting. And so, of course, this is kind of an overhead view. And so, as far as details, when I'm going through this, obviously reading, you're going to get even more details, but obviously there's even more that you can get even beyond this. Just remember that. But this chapter does a good job of just kind of talking about some of the basic things that we think about when we talk about care management and training. So first of all, cats and dogs are going to depend on us, their owners, for food, water, shelter, everything, right? So it's really important for us to get as much information as possible when we are looking to be an owner of a companion animal, to be a responsible owner. When we, what are dogs and cats? What are you getting them for? So when you become a dog or cat owner, obviously it's going to come with responsibility. Making sure you're giving them the proper diet, you're providing them the proper care, you're helping them socialize, you're training them to be, whatever it is you're expecting them to be. There's an obligation, there's also a public responsibility, and making sure that you're doing what you need to do. You should be compassionate for your pet, never abusing them, never neglecting them or abusing them. Complying with local leash laws, making sure you're getting their vaccines, so they are protected from any diseases. Being a good neighbor as far as keeping your pet in and not letting your pet constantly go out on your neighbor's lawn or something like that. So there's a lot of things to consider whenever you're going to be a good dog or cat owner, right? And then kind of shifting gears a little bit, talking a little about young puppies. Obviously, in the very beginning, they're really, really dependent on their mother, but also you. The very beginning, when you're having puppies or kittens, you should provide oversight to make sure that everything is kind of going correctly, right? So whether it's proper temperature, good environment, getting their vaccinations early. So, reading through this chapter, there's a lot of things that's talked about. So, their antibodies is going to come from them developing their own antibodies, but also from the mother passing it on through passive immunity. Their mother is very important to be around, especially, that very first part of a puppy's life. It's really important to have the mother there. When it comes to things that you're doing as far as the owner, so dew claw removal. So in certain breeds, now our crying dew claws, you kind of go by whatever breed standard it is. Getting them removed at a very young age, about 3 days, is an excellent time to do it. So this helps avoid anything in the future if they catch them on and they're torn off or something like that. And also it just depends on the breed in this case. Puppy socialization, we talked about this in the last chapter. I don't need to get into it a whole bunch, but that 3 to 16 weeks is really important to get that socialization done. And then weaning, usually we see puppies wean by 6 to 7 weeks of age. So taking them away from the mother, looking to get them to a new home, and also whenever you do this, encouraging the new owners, or if you are the new owner, to make sure that you understand that it's still in that really important time frame to make sure you're getting all the puppy socialization going and happening as well whenever they get into the new home. This is, also a time we talked about, house training, getting something established as far as who's going to be responsible for different things. And then the growth maturing period, this is when, they're starting to become really, about 12 weeks, becoming really inquisitive. They start increasing their quantity of feed that they're eating. They're starting to lose some of their their teeth, getting their permanent teeth, and so reaching sexual maturity at this stage. So when it comes to the sexual maturity and they're reaching this, it's usually going to be about 9 to 11 months. And so you'll start understanding, and then you make that decision at that point whether you want to have your dogs fixed. Right? So that's an important aspect if you want to prevent them from having offspring. Okay. So here's just some pictures, right? So collie puppies, we're getting them weaned. They're being placed in new homes, and kind of discussing that a little bit. We talk about feeding dogs and cats. There's a lot, and we talked about nutrition already, but it's important that you remember that this is they rely on you, and so they're usually going to get most of their diets are going to have everything in it that they need to have, which is really nice for us, right? As owners, to make sure we can rely on that. This is a cat in a padded cat bed, and so if you have a pet, and as I've seen in some of y'all's posts about, as our pets are spoiled, right? Everybody spoils them a little bit differently, but this cat right here is definitely enjoying life, right? So some other aspects, just touching on real quick, housing, so making sure they have a safe place to be in, right? Space to sleep, space to where they get food and water, where they're comfortable, right? They're getting enough exercise and attention. Obviously, this depends on a dog or a cat, and then also breeds. Certain breeds are going to require more exercise. And as a puppy, we know that it's really important that they get a lot of attention there at the beginning to make sure they're socialized. Equipment or other, related items. There's very different things that you might need depending on what you're going to be doing with your animals. So cats might be inside all the time, and so you might just have a collar on them, and that's one of the only things of equipment. But you also might need a cat carrier, or like a dog, a leash, a collar, some other things, training collars, things like that. Grooming supplies and tools. That really depends on what you're going to be using, right? So maybe a comb, a brush, a nail trimmer, something like that. So it really depends on the breed, how much grooming you might need to do at home. Healthcare, always monitor them continuously, make sure they're being brought into the vet, regularly. They're getting all their vaccinations, regular checkups. Dental care is really important, making sure that their teeth are taken care of, whether it's dog or cat. You can do this at home, but also when you take them to get groomed, you can also have them, them clean their teeth. And also this depends on what type of food they're going to eat. So certain types of food are going to help prevent that plaque buildup. And so, usually that plaque is going to build up more right after eating. And so getting rid of that buildup at home, if you're going to brush their teeth, helps if you want to do that for them. But also that drier dog food is going to be a different, it's not going to build up as much on their teeth as like a canned or wet dog food. Identification, all animals should have proper identification. Thinking about this right now, I am a bad owner because I have a cat at my house and he does not have a collar on because he licks himself and he gets his mouth caught in it. So obviously my cat is just broken anyway, so hopefully he just sticks around. But anyways, identification is super important if they do get out, and there's different ways. So collar is great, but also a microchip or like a tattoo or DNA profile can also help you identify them if they lose their collar. So this is just showing you a whole bunch of different types of pictures that go along with the different types of trainings, right? Leading up here. So just this is the different type of headpiece. This is a dental care kit. But getting into discipline, I have a bunch of pictures, like I just said, of discipline and training. There's different, rewards and punishments whenever they do something to please you as opposed to upset you. So pleasing you, a reward should be given. You're going to praise them. You're going to encourage them. You should teach puppies at an early age. They're going to learn these things early on. Also like giving them a name, things like that. So teaching them at an early age is going to help them as they age, and you can keep, training them. We know that teaching a dog, that thing that people say, you cannot teach old dogs new tricks. It's not true. There's a lot of animals that learn new things later in life. Might be a little more stubborn, but you can. Leash training, it's important to get dogs used to leashes or off the leash in both ways, and you can train them differently. Clicker is basically kind of similar to like a whistle, right? So a trainer uses this, and that kind of gets us into, discussing the different professional obedience training. So you have classes, you can take them to obedience training, agility training, different kinds of things. Maybe, training for special purposes. So these are the kind of dogs that might be guide dogs for, people with any kind of issues, for mobility assistance, for therapy. So the training goes even beyond that. When we talk about house training, obviously that's important for cats and dogs that are inside. We know that cats are actually easier to house train with dogs, and everybody has their own way to house train, right? And so I am not going to act like a professional on this. My cat came litter box trained, and I've had one puppy, and it's a corgi, and they're super easy to house train. And so there's different ways, and so there's some tricks in here that's going to detail that a little bit. And so this is just showing you, some pictures about outdoor training of dogs that they're doing. So there's some German Shepherds. German Shepherd there in the front, and there's other breeds of dogs they're using training. This is a handler with another German Shepherd waiting for a command. This is a ready position. These Shetland sheepdogs are going across a dog walk, which is an obstacle and an agility course. This is an agility jump for a German Shepherd dog. And that same dog I think we just saw a second ago that's on an agility course. There's a dog catching a frisbee. Here's just an example of a therapy type dog, or a special kind of trained dog that's helping their owner open a door. So there's all these different types of training that you could potentially have for dogs specifically. Just running over the kittens or cats, kind of same thing that we're talking about. So bringing a weaned kitten, what time do you do that? Like, by 12 weeks, they should be eating a good, so we move them for about 10 to 12 weeks. Indoor versus outdoors. We know that cats are safest indoor, but we've seen them, roaming freely, but they can, obviously, have to, they could get taken up by predators or hit by cars or diseases or something if they live outside. So if you have a cat that goes inside and outside, getting identification, getting its vaccination, maybe getting them fixed is good to know. When you talk about your residents and your cat, making sure that they have a good place that they are living in and that they can explore it safely without you being worried about them breaking things, so kind of make sure that they kind of are going to be able to work together, right? Certain plants can be dangerous to cats, so it's super important if you're going to have plants in the house to make sure that they're going to not be poisoned by whatever it is. So kind of do a little research. There's different articles and websites that you can actually check and see if there's something that's toxic. Training cats, they're not going to train well. They don't feel the need to impress their owners, so not much training besides, but you got to start really early if you want to. Neutering cats, personality differences between males and females are going to be limited. If you're going to do that, plan ahead, because different behaviors are going to change a little bit, which is good. So like in males, they usually won't mark as much once they get fixed. And then just other management tidbits talked about here, what kind of exercise, if you're going to trim their claws, giving them, fresh air and sunlight is important. They really enjoy that. Toys and treats, cat carriers, not all cats like that, so kind of plan ahead. This is just, kittens playing while their mother is resting. And lastly, this is the last little page in your chapter, but just different laws about humane handling, care, and treatment of dogs and cats. So whether it's laws directly from APHIS, which is in the Department of Agriculture, or the Animal Welfare Act, there's a lot of laws out there that do protect animals and make sure they're being humanely treated. And just lastly, wrapping up, and I mentioned this before, becoming familiar with how your animal acts and what the normal processes are in their day is super important to make sure that you're aware if something is wrong or if they're sick or something like that. And so that is all for this chapter. So in this last chapter, we're going to talk a little bit about fitting, grooming, and showing. This video is already a little long, so I'm going to try to be quick as we run through this. So first of all, just talking a little bit about what fitting means. This basically means properly, fitting and grooming means, and properly preparing dogs or cats for a particular assignment, or performance, or competition, or something. So fitness is the overall state of nutrition and health, as well as, those methods that you've used or the training to get them to compete. And then grooming includes, giving proper attention to the hair, coat, and physical appearance of the pet. And so, different, if you were going to go and run a marathon, you're probably going to train for it first. Same as we're talking about like dogs that are going to be put into a competition. It's really important that they are prepared for whatever they're being asked to do. And so that's kind of talking about, fitting or conditioning. And then also grooming usually goes into that if we're talking about like dog shows or something. This is just, a dog that is catching a frisbee. But the point here is that, getting them warmed up and stuff, just because it does involve jumping and twisting. And so making sure that they are prepared and they've been fit to do what task you're asking them of. So talking a little bit about grooming, although, most cats are going to be really meticulous and really clean and good about their hygiene, it is going to be something that they could benefit from if you do grooming by their owners or their handlers. This, helps with that. It helps get rid of loose hair or any kind of parasites they might have from the cat. A lot of times cats will ingest the loose hair while they're self-grooming. And then usually eject that in form of a hairball. So if you can help groom to maybe limit those. As you're grooming, this contributes to, a bonding among litter mates as well as between the owner and the cat. This is really more important for longer hair breeds, but also, something that helps kind of with that relationship, or maybe when you're trying to get rid of a winter coat or something like that. Here's just some pictures. So this is going to have a bonding as well as, a grooming benefit, but also a bonding. And you'll see litter mates or, sometimes animals that are kept together, cats, they might groom each other. And so there's kind of a bonding right here. So they're helping each other. And so they've bonded some. Then we talk about dogs. Amount of needed grooming that's needed for dogs really depends on the breed. Okay, so it's really essential if you're preparing dogs for show competition. This includes different things. So whether it's cleaning eyes, making sure that they're clean and bright, if there's no buildup or swelling, that's obviously grooming, but also hygiene and nutrition too. Their ears, getting those cleaned. Their feet, that's going to play into any kind of other body parts are really important. Their claws, so making sure those are trimmed regularly, cleaning the teeth, making sure that the hair and the skin coat are clean. And so there's a lot of things that go into grooming for dogs, and not just the hair and the skin, right? And so this is, kind of looking at it from a perspective of maybe showing dogs, but it is important too, some dogs that have really thick coats, maybe in the summer, getting them, taken into groom to maybe get them trimmed down or even shaved, because it's super hot, so it helps them, something like that. Even if you're not showing, there is some things that you can use here. So here's some tools that you might need for grooming. So combs, claw trimmers, things like that. This is a breed. So poodles are actually one of those that actually require very frequent grooming. And this is just showing you the canine claw. So you don't want to trim those claws too close, because then that causes bleeding and it can be damaged if you get to the quick, and obviously it's painful for the dogs. And then another part of grooming too is going to the anal sacs or something, that when you take them in to get groomed, they'll actually go ahead and clean those out and things like that. And a lot of times they'll naturally do it, but sometimes there might be issues that they're not, and so it is good, and that can prevent any kind of smell or kind of issue like that. If we're talking about showing dogs and cats, this is something that a lot of people might be really interested in. There's personal pleasure, fulfillment. They might show their favorite pet. They give a lot of attention to grooming and to training. There's hundreds of cat and dog shows sponsored by different organizations and clubs annually. Jumping into the cat show, cats themselves. There's a whole bunch of different types, and you can show non-pedigreed cats. When we talk about the 3 C's, this is referring to color, coat, and conformation. And so basically this is just, breed standards that you're looking at. They use those 3 C's. And so, a challenge for judges of multiple breeds is learning the characteristics and traits that are desired by each breed, as well as the different, rules and specifications. And if you look in your book on page 397 and 398, there's actually a list of awards that they can get. So there's many different titles. So it's whatever, show they might win. These are the different titles they can actually receive. When it comes to dog shows and showing, these have 2 main branches. So conformation, and that's dealing with breed characteristics, type, structure, movement. And this is really focusing on how closely they are following what the breed characteristics are. So it's not necessarily comparing one to the other, but basically what animal, each individual animal, how closely they are meeting the breed characteristics and requirements. And then you have your performance branch, which is, obedience, agility, herding, tracking, and other things. And so dogs are commonly given titles based on when they receive a number of points from the judges at 3 or 4 shows approved by the Breed Association. And so the different titles that they can actually win, they're found in your book, as far as the championship point award system is listed in your book. In addition, in your book you can see the different information about judging conformation dog shows, the different requirements, right? So you might evaluate their head, how it's, the shape of it, and give them points. Their forequarters or hindquarters, their gait, how smooth it is, and how all these things match up to what their breed requirements are. And so, there's a couple things in here, just giving some examples of what the dog judges look for. Like in a Greater Swiss Mountain Dog, they're bred for draft work. So their eyes need to be a certain color, their coat is a certain length, and the color of it as well is important. Symmetry of markings are really required. And then a miniature poodle, thinking about their different requirements. So the different shades of colors, so they can be varying shades. Also they have a certain way that they're clipped with those pom-poms on their hips. And the height is really important here. And so there's different ways that they're evaluated. I'm moving into the more performance type showing. Different things are expected depending on the different titles that they're entered in. Many performance events begin with the introductory level competition, and then you move through to masters or excellence, of excellence level. There's a list, so from 404 to the top of 406, there's all these different lists of AKC titles, whether everything from Master Agility Champion to versatile dog companion dogs. There's all different levels that we're seeing as far as what they can win in their different area. And showing you just right here, so here's a junior handler getting the best of breed ribbon with his dog. This is giving you an example of, this is a herding excellent course that they're doing. So let's see, that's another agility type course. The same dog from a couple slides earlier. This is Georgia and Junior Showmanship at a Westminster Kennel Club. Yeah, the same. So a lot of the same people we're seeing right here participating in junior showmanship. So we talked about the different breed requirements for a standard poodle. So we're seeing an example, same picture in your book. This is another picture of the same dog from before. I'm doing an agility course here as well. Another example. Same dog. Yeah, this book really liked that dog. Same dog also winning a big award. So we're going to wrap up this and just, there's a lot of different reasons to have a dog or a cat, and you can also enter them in different shows and exhibit them for different reasons. So that's just another thing, just on top of having the joy of owning a dog or a cat as a companion animal. So that wraps up. I'm sorry, today I'm recording this lecture and I can't seem to pronounce any words right. Anyways, so this is week 6, so we're wrapping up that. So it was chapters 12, 13, and 14. I know this ran a little long, but I didn't really want to divide it up. But anyways, you have your discussion posts and your quizzes, your quiz for this week, and that is it. Thank you guys so much. See you next week.